Joining me now is our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell, and our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Kelly, let me start with you today. You know, we don't see President Biden come out every time that we make an additional we send an additional round of support or weapons to Ukraine. But he did today. I'm guessing this was for an audience in Berlin.
And he did so with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense at his side. And that does send a strong message. This seemed to really be about two audiences in many respects, European partners and President Zelensky. And certainly you could go to the next layer, and that's a message to Russia and certainly to the American people. But wanting to fortify those relationships, because the U.S. has been so clear for days about their concerns, even weeks, about their concerns about the sophisticated nature of the M1 Abrams tank and how it is a very difficult weapon system to use, and that it requires training and requires a complicated supply line to be effective in theater. And yet they have now decided they will commit this, in part because I think it's pretty obvious from the outward signs, they wanted to reassure European partners that if they also committed tanks that will get there much more quickly, that the United States would keep the flow of significant vehicles that are armored and that can help this next phase of the fight. We've heard from senior officials today beyond the president talking about how they believe this to be a capacity that the Ukrainians can use to reclaim part of their country that's been taken over by Russia. And the president was also very clear that he does not see this as any kind of a threat to Russia because it is not offensive in his judgment. Russia may deem it that way, but it's about strengthening their defenses within their own homeland. So definitely there was diplomacy as well as defensive capability on the agenda today, Chuck.
And Kelly, did you get the sense that Berlin and Washington were coordinating these announcements in the last 2 days?
I certainly anticipated that, because when I woke up early this morning and saw that Scholz had just made his announcement and knew that the president had not yet put his on a public calendar, it seemed to me that the pacing was unfolding. That first, I have Europe signal what it would do, have the president follow. He did not have public events on his schedule prior to that. So the room was ready in his day, his public day, for this to take place. So it seemed to be well coordinated, and our colleague Courtney was already well aware of what these plans were going to be.
Well, let me go to Courtney. Thank you for that handoff there, Kelly. So, Courtney, it is interesting to me that it sounds like the military side of the Biden administration was like, this doesn't seem like a good idea, not necessarily because they don't think the tank should go, but, you know, that that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, I guess, to borrow a phrase that the youngsters like to use some days, but that this really was the State Department and Biden having to say, no, guys, you may not think it logistically makes sense, but we got to do it. Is that your sense?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Chuck. So yes, we've been hearing about the logistics hurdles. I mean, and that is, we shouldn't understate that. The Abrams are extremely difficult to maintain. They're gas guzzlers. They require an entire logistics package with them. They're also tough to train on. But, and also, there's the problem of having to provide an exportable model. So the kind of, the tank that the U.S. would give to other allies here is not necessarily the exact same capabilities that the U.S. military uses. And that's for a whole host of reasons, including the concern that if they don't have a full accountability of a system like a tank and it falls into the wrong hands, that information could be exploited. So those are three big challenges, in addition to the major challenge of getting a bunch of tanks from the United States to Ukraine. So keep all that in the back of your head. Challenges, not insurmountable, though. That wasn't the only reason that U.S. military leaders, including Secretary Austin and General Milley, were resistant to this decision. It was also the fact that they claimed that this was not the right capability at this time. So that's this has really been a head-snapping change in the last 48 hours. But it's not so much about getting these Abrams tanks to Ukraine for the current fight. The reality is the coming offensive is going to be more of a tank battle than we've seen in Ukraine because of many reasons, the chief one being ammunition, artillery, precision-guided munitions are running lower and lower, particularly on the Russian side. We're going to see more of a tank battle and each side trying to break through the other's defenses in the coming months. 31 Abrams tanks heading into that country in months, year, maybe even a year from now. That's not for the current fight. This announcement was all about opening the floodgates. That's what U.S. officials were hoping for other countries to provide the tanks. The Ukrainians have said they need 300 tanks for the coming counteroffensive against the Russians. Now the hope is that allies will provide that and they may get close to that number.
Well, what is there? I was told there's approximately 2,200 Leopard tanks in Europe among NATO allies, and that they hope that some percentage of that is what makes it to Ukraine. Is that the numbers you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, the goal that people are talking about here is 200, somewhere between 250 and 350 tanks getting to Ukraine. Now, some countries, the challengers are going to come from Great Britain. We now know Germany is going to send some of the Leopards. But in addition to those, there actually are other allies, like Poland, who have M1 Abrams tanks as well, and they have the exportable version. Now, some of those they just got, 30 of them or so in the last year or so, but it's not outside the realm of possible that maybe some Abrams tanks will go from other nations as well. That's sort of what the U.S. is talking about here. They're hoping that this announcement today, it's less about those Abrams tanks being part of any kind of upcoming operational ability. It's more about the picture to the allies, the signal to the allies here.
All right, you humored us today when my producer said, wait a minute, how often do we say, no, we're not doing that? And then 2 weeks later, it's like, okay. And you quickly went Javelins, Stingers, HIMARS, drones, Patriots, now Abrams. So that brings me to F-16s. And, there's a part of me that I assume, no, we're not going to go there, especially what you describe as what's the coming fight going to be? Well, it's trench warfare. That's why this is a tank fight and not necessarily a fight in the air unless Ukraine's aerial defenses start to weaken. So what's going to happen here with the F-16s?
So, I mean, it's all the same problems that we've heard about from for providing the Abrams are the exact same issues with the F-16. There's one difference, and that is when you talk about Ukraine providing what the military calls an integrated air defense. That's something that means they have air defenses that are at all different altitudes and at long distances. An integrated air defense would generally include attack aircraft like an F-16. If the U.S. and the world is really trying to build up their air defenses and to maintain a safe skies over Ukraine, it would stand to reason that they would provide them some sort of attack aircraft. The other big concern is that what's going to happen going forward? Yes, we talked about the potential, the reality and the likelihood of a tank battle going forward. It's not outside the realm of possible also that Russia would use their extensive and capable Air Force in the coming months, especially if they need to gain some momentum. If that's the case, that's why we saw the Patriot system go in. If that's the case, I don't think it's unreasonable that the U.S. would really start to consider providing them F-16s. The big concern is, training, the maintenance, actually finding them in the stockpiles, and then this is one of the more provocative assets, like the Patriots, that there would be concerns about that as well.
Kelly, what does John Kirby say in that briefing room about F-16s?
Well, much like you alluded to, that they talk about the fact that they want to be responsive to the changing dynamics of the battlefield, and that there have been requests, and he says it is the right thing for President Zelensky to ask for these things, and as the dynamics change of what is needed, they will be responding to that. But he hasn't closed the door on that, and he hasn't really welcomed us to speculate much on that as well.
Well, I think we've all learned no is not no these days, at least when it comes to Ukraine's ask of the American war machine. Kelly O'Donnell and Courtney Kube getting us started with all of that reporting. Thanks to the both of you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.